Hi guys, so it's been a while, but I'm starting to get a collection of sprues from both Warhammer figures and the WizKids Dungeons and Dragons figures, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I've got lots of sprues and well, I think we need to turn them into something. And obviously something I need lots of are these, floor tiles. And in this case I'm making dungeon floor tiles. And as you can see, they've got magnets in them, which obviously helps keep them all together, which is pretty cool, so you can arrange as many as you need. And obviously if you need to make them long ways, then yeah, they obviously stay together that way as well, which is pretty cool. So the first thing I did to make these dungeon tiles, and that was basically to make one dungeon tile that I could then make copies from. So to do this, I marked out on a bit of MDF sheet, which obviously you can cut with a blade. It takes a few sort of scores to get through it. It's not too bad. And I've obviously gone with a 3x3 floor tile. Obviously you can go by whatever you want. And obviously you can make as many different sort of moulds up as you want. But I'm just making this one just to sort of show how easy it is to make the mould, or the cast, or the figure, or whatever it is I'm making. Who knows? Yeah, so obviously I'll make some tiles up, and obviously this is how I kind of make my tiles up all the time now. Get some good old foam board, and then cut it up into 25mm squares, as this is obviously one square that represents where the figures go, and obviously helps with the movement speed and all the rest of it. So I've got these tiles, but obviously I don't need them to be this sort of deep. So cutting them in half obviously means I get twice as many, and it also means I don't have to make the mould as deep as it would be if obviously I left them as they are. So yeah, cut them in half, and the other thing I like about this is it makes the tiles so they're a little bit more uneven. They're not all sort of flat. So when you do lay them together, they are all higgledy-piggledy. But obviously these foam tiles are too clean looking, and the best way to, well, damage these up a bit, I have to put them in a little box with plenty of stones and give them a good old shake. And I shake them, well, a lot more than you see on camera. I give them a right good old bashing, and then that way when they come out, obviously they're nice and rounded, and obviously the front edges are cracked, dented, and basically just worn, but in a sort of a more natural way than if you try to do it sort of by hand any other way really. So then these all get stuck down onto a little MDF sheet, and the best thing I find for sticking foam without it dissolving, melting, all the rest of it, and that is good old Gorilla Glue. It's great stuff this, and the thing that I love about it as well is obviously it sticks anything to anything, plus it takes about 20 minutes for it to sort of fully harden or cure, or whatever the technical term is. But obviously this is great because it gives us time to manoeuvre them on there, and if we need to we can move them around, which is pretty cool. So yeah, 20 minutes later and they've all stuck down and nice and hard. There's obviously gaps in between, but that's perfectly fine, as I'm now going to fill that with some filler. Obviously here in the UK we use grout. I think in America is it speckle or spackle, or well, something else. But yeah, basically good old filler, grout, whatever you want to call it. Stick that in all the gaps. And I've also gone around the sides as well, just sort of neaten it up basically. You don't really need to do this, but I like to make things nice and neat. Even sometimes the bits that you can't actually see, I just like them nice and neat. It may be a bit of an OCD I have, but yeah, I do like neatness, cleanliness, and all that jazz. Yeah, so now we're going to make the mould. I haven't made a mould for ages. When I first started this channel, I used to be making moulds left, right and centre. But yeah, I haven't made any for quite some time. So a lot of the stuff I'm using, I've actually had for a good year and a half, maybe longer. So it's quite interesting to see whether or not the stuff would still work. Which obviously it does, because you've seen the final result and I have got tiles. I probably could have used normal glue to glue these things down, because say Gorilla Glue is awesome, but it does take 20 minutes to really sort of dry. So yeah, so this I probably should have done with super glue, because it would have been a whole lot quicker time wise. But hey ho, I've got lots of this Gorilla Glue, so I'm going to use it. But here we go, 20 minutes later, it's all glued down and it's nice and sealed, which is cool. Because I wasn't too sure with the silicone mould that I'm going to make whether it would eat into these tiles. So I've gone over the whole thing with some PVA glue just to make sure it doesn't. So I've got this 2-part silicone rubber, which I've had, say, this is well over a year and a half, maybe a bit longer. And it's been opened as well, so I have used it. So this is where it's going to be interesting to see whether or not it's still good to go. And the one I'm using is mixed on a ratio of 10:1. So obviously always check which ones you use, because I have used ones that are mixed on a ratio of 2:1, and I've even had one that was a 1:1 ratio. Obviously one of them's the silicone rubber and the other one is a hardener, and in this case it's obviously this little red one. So something I will say here, guys, obviously as you can see I'm not wearing gloves. This is mainly because I don't tend to make a mess. But yeah, it could be worth wearing gloves because obviously you don't want this stuff on your skin. But as I say, generally I'm quite a clean sort of person. So yeah, and luckily I didn't make any mess from this, so none of it went on my hands. And then yeah, pouring from a high sort of area, just so you get a thin little line. It gets in all the old nooks and crannies. And obviously this sort of stuff, it kind of like self-levels, I guess. I didn't have any of the sheets that came with this, so I wasn't too sure how long it would take for it to harden. But I think it's about 7-8 hours on this one. I haven't got one of those vacuum things either, so what I do is I just bash the table, and that tries or generally gets rid of all the air bubbles, which is pretty cool. So I can put that to one side so it cures, and now on to making the Sprue Goo, which is obviously what I'm going to use to cast all those lovely tiles you just saw earlier. And with the sprues, it is a case of cutting them up. Obviously you could cut these up into really small bits, but as a general rule of thumb I cut them up just so they can fit inside, well, whatever container I'm going to put them in. And so if you cut them up smaller, it probably would make them dissolve quicker, but I generally just cut them up to whatever size, leave them in a jar overnight, and then they're done. So yeah, so my only requirement here is making sure they're cut into sizes that fit in the jar. And this is the jar that I'm using. Obviously any kind of jar will do. Obviously give it a good old clean out first, keep the lid and all that. This is the acetone. It does say acetone on it, obviously you couldn't quite see it. What I bought one of these like big 5-litre jobbies. Again, I've had it for about a year or so. Put it into this smaller container. And again, if you want to wear gloves for this part, wear gloves. Again, I'd try not to get it on my hands. And as you can see, I fill the jar half up with acetone and then just completely fill it up with all the sprues. Put the lid on and then leave it. And as simple as that. So about 2 hours later, you can obviously start to see it is dissolving. And there you go. I'm melting. But yeah, it's looking good. So obviously you leave it obviously quite a bit longer. And then we got 4 hours later and you can see it's almost sort of getting there. It's a nice old gloopy stuff. But say in general, I normally do this for a good 7 to 8 hours. But typically whenever I do this, I put them in the jar and then leave it overnight. Just because obviously it makes things a lot easier. And there we go. So now we've got the Sprue Goo all nice and soft. And we've got our main mould, well, all nice and hard. Oh, matron. And now it's time to take the mould out and check, well, how it's come out really. Pretty simple to come off. Obviously these bits say they were just simply glued in a few areas. They peel away rather nicely. So I didn't need to use any sort of like demoulding stuff in this, or talcum powder, or well, or anything really. I just poured obviously the silicone rubber straight into it, and yeah, it's coming out pretty cool. And as we can see, the original one is still there, so it didn't dissolve in any way, which is pretty cool, which means I can make more of these kind of molds. And yeah, lots of impressions in the silicone rubber, which is pretty awesome. So as you can see, I am now wearing gloves, just because this bit, well, this bit does get messy, and it's just easier wearing gloves because I can use my fingers if required to push in the ooey gooey spruey stuff, which yeah, as you can see, it is nice and soft now. So it is just a case of putting it in, using obviously this little spatula thing I've got, and then pushing it down deep. One good thing about this ooey gooey stuff, it does like to sort of sink and settle down into places, which is pretty cool. So you don't really need to sort of push too hard, because it will eventually just sort of settle in to all those little nooks and crannies and all the rest of it. So the one problem with this ooey gooey stuff at this stage is it does stick to everything. As you can see, it's sticking to my gloves and everywhere else. So yeah, within about 30 seconds to a minute, it does sort of start to obviously dry in the air. And yeah, so the outer areas are easier to touch. But obviously it does take a good while for that whole thing to sort of dry. So this is 7 hours later. I had a bit of board on top just to help sort of keep the thing flattened in a little bit. But obviously the other thing is when it does dry, it does shrink a little bit. And obviously you can see all these little air pockets and holes and bits and pieces. And basically that's where the acetone would have been. And then as it sort of evaporated, it leaves little gaps. So that's why some things Sprue Goo isn't good for. But other things like these floor tiles, it kind of helps and adds to the look of things in the fact that it isn't perfect looking, which is fine. So yeah, it's a case of then going through and making loads more. And then when your jar of Sprue Goo starts to sort of look like it's getting a bit low, it's just a case of simply topping it up. So you don't have to wait for it to be sort of completely empty. You just sort of keep topping it up as you go. So I know in the past I did get loads of comments about what I used to do with any excess acetone, and basically there isn't any. As you can see, I just keep putting in sprues, and then when the acetone level does sort of drop, you just put in more acetone. So this jar gets used kind of like forever and ever, basically, which is pretty cool. So as I say, yeah, went through, obviously made loads more tiles. Well, I say loads, I ended up making 4 in the end. Because the one downside to this thing is, obviously each tile, it takes 7 hours. So yeah, if you're going to make loads of tiles this way, bear in mind, it's not the quickest way, but obviously you are recycling something you would normally throw away. So yeah, so after the 7 hours they come out, but they are still a little bit on the soft side, which is kind of good in a way, because obviously in this case I'm using my little tool here just to make the grooves in between a little bit more noticeable. I mean, they're not too bad, but I just wanted to make the tiles look a bit more sort of separated from each other. So yeah, because it is still soft, you can use the tool to just sort of well, make a bit more of an indentation. So yeah, they come out pretty well. Obviously they do sort of line up reasonably well, but obviously there's a little bit of difference in the edges and they're not perfectly sort of square, but that's fine. Once these things are fully hardened, which is probably another good 5 hours after that 7, so I mean we really are talking like a good day later, they are then rock hard and like solid plastic, so they can be sanded, drilled and whatever you want to do to them, which is pretty cool because I'm going to use these magnets on them. And as you can see, I've got this highly technical way of finding a centre. Yeah, good old by eye and a few lines on the floor. Obviously with the drilling, I'm going to use a small sort of drill to do like a pilot hole first. Just obviously this will make it easier when I come to use the bigger drill bit, which is here. And yeah, just do it nice and slowly. And yeah, it doesn't take obviously much pressure to make the little hole that's required. So a good old little dollop of glue in there. Get your magnet and pop the little fella in. So I've done it so that obviously either side of the these tiles, the magnets, one's going one way, one's going the other way, and on the sides it's the same again. There's a north one and a south one, just so these can be sort of like assembled in kind of any kind of way you want. And obviously you can build these up bigger than I've done. Obviously I've done 4, but yeah, I mean you can make these as big as you want, small as you want, and obviously if you were going to make tiles this way, I would definitely make more moulds. That way obviously you can produce more at a time. And as well as having obviously square ones, you'd have like long singular ones. Well, whatever kind of ones you need, really. And once that's all done, I've then primed them and then do a bit of painting on the top. Obviously the paint on these, nice and simple, a bit of dry brushing. I'm using a couple of different greys. One's like a grey and one's a bit more of a greeny grey, just to add on to a different sort of effect for the tiles. And then say dry brushing over the whole top, go in different directions, and yeah, trying to make it look a bit sort of natural looking, or as natural as we can. And then once I've done that to all the tiles, I've let them dry. I'm then going over with a white, again very much dry brushing with the white, so it really does just catch sort of the top edges. It just gives it a bit more of a worn sort of look. And again, when you can vary these tiles up as much or as little as you want. And obviously you don't have to make just sort of these kind of tiles. You can do all kinds of different sort of paving tiles or even walls. I think that's what I'm going to do in the next video, guys. I'm going to do a little wall video. But yeah, anything you guys want to see me make out of sprues, by all means let me know in the comments and I will have a go at making things. Because I like to make different sort of things out of sprues. And obviously guys, I have put my old sprue videos back to public. So you can see all the sprue videos or things I've done with sprues over the last sort of couple of years. And yeah, there's quite a lot of stuff you can do with sprues. If you are new to the channel, go check them out, because you'll be quite surprised what you can make with sprues, and obviously good old Sprue Goo. So yeah, that's kind of it then, guys. If you have any questions at all about Sprue Goos and making things with sprues, leave them in the comments. I'll always look at them and answer them where I can. And yeah, if you're new here, guys, hit that subscribe button if you like what I do. Hit the like button. But yeah, all that good stuff basically, guys. Okay, big shout out, thank you to all the sponsors. I am now doing a lot more work on Patreon, so if you want to see a lot more behind the scenes stuff and obviously see what I'm working on before it comes out on YouTube, yeah, consider becoming a patron. Okay guys, that's it. Take care. Bye for now.